My phone buzzed at 7:12 a.m., and I didn't know yet that those 12 words were about to end my family. I got fired again. Send money. Don't make this a thing. No hello, no shame, just a demand, like I was an ATM that had forgotten its purpose. For 11 and a half years, I had paid for everything: rent, bills, vacations, even my brother's mistakes. I thought I was keeping the family together. I was wrong. I was just the easiest person to break. And that morning, as I stared at that message, something inside me finally snapped, because this time, I didn't say yes. Before we get into it, hit like and tell me, have you ever been the one who finally said no after years of keeping the family together? Let's continue my story. My name is Alessia. When my younger brother Rufus sent me this message, I was standing at the kitchen counter in my robe, coffee mug warm between both palms, watching the rain trace slow paths down the window glass. The city below was already moving, umbrellas blooming on the sidewalk like dark flowers, taxis cutting through gray puddles, and for one perfect, silent moment, I felt like my life was exactly the size it was supposed to be. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look. I almost set the mug down, walked to the shower, and let the notification sit unread, the way you let a letter sit on the counter when some part of you already knows it contains bad news. But I looked. I always looked. 11 and a half years of conditioning had made looking a reflex, the same way career firefighters wake at the faintest smell of smoke. Alessia, lost my job again. You'll cover rent and expenses until I figure things out. Don't make this difficult. My fingers tightened around the mug. For a second, I thought I might drop it, but I didn't. I never dropped anything. That had always been my role. Hold everything together. Not because the words were complicated. They weren't. Rufus had never been complicated, blunt as a hammer, just as heavy, and somehow always finding a way to land directly on the softest part of me. I read it 3 times, because some stubborn, still hopeful corner of my brain kept searching for a word I'd missed, a softening I'd skipped over in my first shocked pass, a please maybe, a sorry to ask again, some small human acknowledgement that this was, by anyone's count, the 12th time in 11 years that my younger brother had lost a job and turned to face me with his hand out. No hi, no explanation, just a command. There was nothing, not a question mark, not an ellipses, just a demand, delivered the way you might text a bank. I set my phone face down on the counter. I picked up my coffee, I took one long sip and stared out at the rain. And then, very quietly, something inside me, something that had been bending for a very, very long time, made a sound like a green branch finally giving way. I exhaled slowly, but my chest didn't empty. It felt overfull, like something inside me had been piling up for years, quietly, obediently, waiting for a moment like this to overflow. 11 and a half years. I was the oldest. I was also, by some genetic accident or divine joke, the one who turned out to be good at things that paid. Good grades, good instincts, good at sitting very still in interviews and convincing people I was calmer than I felt. By 23, I had a proper salary. By 25, I had the kind of salary that my father exhaled slowly and my mother say things like, "Alessia will sort it." Rufus was 11 years younger than me, the baby, the surprise, the one Mom called her little comet, because he arrived fast, lit everything up, and left wreckage in his wake without ever seeming to notice. He was charming, Rufus, genuinely, exhaustingly charming, with a grin that made people forgive him before he'd even finished whatever sentence he was using to explain why the thing wasn't his fault. Teachers adored him and then gave up on him. Employers hired him and then replaced him. Girlfriends fell for him and then fled, usually leaving me a politely worded text asking if Rufus was always like this. The answer was yes. The answer was always yes. And for 11.5 years, I had quietly, reliably, unfailingly ensured that Rufus's particular brand of chaos never quite reached the floor. Rent when he couldn't cover it, which was often, a loan when his car was repossessed, which happened twice, the family phone plan in my name because Dad's credit score was a ruin and Mom insisted it was too complicated to change. My parents' mortgage top-up during the bad quarter of 2019, presented to me not as a request but as a logistical summary of the situation. Rufus's insurance, Rufus's vacation to Tenerife, a trip I was informed about after the flights were already booked. I want you to understand, I did all of it willingly, or rather, and this is the distinction that would take me 11.5 years to fully see, I did all of it without resistance, which is not at all the same thing. Not because they asked nicely, but because I thought if I stopped, everything would fall apart. My phone rang. Mom. Of course. I stared at her name until the screen dimmed, then answered. Alessia, sweetheart, Rufus told me what happened. He's going through a hard time. He got fired, I said quietly. A pause, then sharper. You know how he is. He just needs support right now. Support. That word again. I closed my eyes. And me? What do I need? Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. Then she sighed. Don't start this. You're the strong one. Strong. Stable. Dependable. Convenient. I ended the call without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, from something else, something dangerous. I looked back at Rufus's message, at the years behind it, at the version of myself who would have already sent the money without a second thought. And then, for the first time, I didn't move, because a question sharp as glass cut through everything I thought I knew. What if this wasn't love, but a life sentence? And if it was, why was I still serving it? If you had walked into our house on a Sunday evening, you would have envied us. The table was always full, laughter, warm light, the smell of roasted chicken drifting through the air like something out of a perfect life, and at the center of it, me. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as a function. To Alessia, Mom would say, lifting her glass, her smile polished and proud. Everyone clinked glasses. Rufus smirked. Yeah, don't ever quit on us. They laughed. I laughed too, but something about that word running stuck in my throat, like I wasn't part of the family, like I was powering it. Dinner ended the way it always did, plates left behind, Dad leaning back satisfied, Rufus already scrolling his phone, and me collecting everything, even the bill. Later that night, I stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, water running too hot against my hands. Mom appeared beside me, lowering her voice like we were sharing a secret. Rufus is struggling again, she said gently. You'll help him out, right? I didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, I didn't want to say yes. He's had 12 chances, I said quietly. She sighed, disappointed. You've always been the stable one, Alessia. Don't make this complicated. Stable. There it was again. Not loved, not appreciated, useful. Lost in thought, I came home that evening. You okay? The voice came from behind me. I turned. My flatmate, Dara, was standing in the kitchen doorway in her work clothes, bag over her shoulder, reading my face with the practiced accuracy of someone who had watched me field too many of these evenings. Your door was open, she said. Dara was my closest friend, had been since we'd been placed at adjacent desks on our first week at Brannock Consulting 7 years ago. She was sharp, funny, entirely without illusions, and she had been telling me with increasing directness for approximately 4 of those 7 years that my family's relationship to my bank account constituted something she called a polite crime.
"Rufus," I said. She closed her eyes briefly. "How bad?" "12th job." She opened her eyes. "12th? He wants me to cover expenses. Quote, don't make this difficult." There was a pause. Dara set her bag down on the kitchen chair, which meant she was staying another 5 minutes, which meant she had decided I needed those 5 minutes, even if I hadn't asked for them. "Alessia," she said, with the particular gentleness she reserved for conversations she knew I didn't want to have, "when's the last time you bought yourself something? Not for them, for you, just for you." I started to answer. I stopped. I thought about the coat I'd seen in the shop window on Cartwright Lane 6 weeks ago, the trip to the Italian coast I'd had open in a browser tab since February, before closing it because the dates conflicted with covering Rufus's back rent. I thought about the Sydney contract, the one HR had sent me 3 months ago, an extraordinary opportunity at Brannock's Pacific Division, in which I had not opened because I already knew what I'd feel when I read it. Wanted, not by my family, by myself, by the version of me that existed outside of them. "I'll think about it," I said. Dara picked up her bag. She looked at me once more. And the look she gave me wasn't pity. It was something more uncomfortable than that. It was clarity, the kind that lives in someone else's eyes when you are still too deep inside the fog to find it in your own. "Alessia," she said, quietly, "they love you because it's convenient, Alessia. I say that as someone who loves you inconveniently, just so you know the difference." She left. The kitchen went quiet. The rain kept falling. And as I scrolled, a thought began to take shape, slow, terrifying, impossible to ignore. If I stopped, would they still call me family? Or would I finally see the truth, that I was never the heart of this home, just the wallet keeping it alive? I stared at Rufus's new message until the words stopped looking like text and started feeling like a sentence I had been serving for 11.5 years. Send money, don't make this a thing. My thumbs hovered over the screen. This was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, just me, and a choice I had never made before. My chest tightened, old instincts rising fast. Fix it, send it, keep the peace. But another voice cut through, steady, unfamiliar, impossible to ignore. "And who keeps you?" My hands trembled. I typed, deleted, typed again. "Rufus," I started, then stopped. Too soft. Backspace. This time I didn't soften it. "That's not on me. Family isn't my punishment." I read it once, twice. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then I pressed send. The world didn't end. No lightning, no collapse, just silence. And in that silence, something shifted. Something inside me loosened, like a knot I didn't know I'd been carrying had finally slipped free. My phone buzzed almost instantly. "Rufus, are you serious right now?" Another message. "After everything I've been through?" I let out a hollow laugh. "Everything you've been through?" I stood up, pacing the kitchen. "Where were you," I whispered to the empty room, voice cracking, "when I was drowning under your life?" The phone rang. I didn't need to look. "Mom." I answered. "Alessia." Her voice came sharp this time, no softness left. "What is wrong with you?" There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Why are you hurting?" Just accusation. I said no. A pause. Then, "You don't mean that." I swallowed hard. "I do." Her tone dropped, cold now. "Your brother needs you."
And I needed all of you, I said, my voice shaking despite me, for years. Silence, heavy, pressing. Then she said it. You're being selfish. The word hit like a slap. For a second, tears burned my eyes, because a part of me still wanted her to understand, still wanted her to choose me. But she didn't. She chose the version of me that paid. I ended the call slowly. My hands were shaking, but I didn't break, because across the room my laptop screen glowed, the Sydney contract, waiting, daring me. I walked toward it, each step heavier than the last, because I knew this wasn't just about saying no to Rufus, it was about saying yes to a life they never planned for me to have. My finger hovered over the trackpad, and a single thought burned through everything. If I don't leave now, will I ever? The knock came at 6:19 p.m., sharp, certain, not a question, an expectation. I froze halfway to the door, my breath catching in my throat. No one knocked like that unless they believed the door already belonged to them. I didn't need to check, but I did. Rufus stood on the other side, jaw tight, eyes burning not with shame, not even with anger, with certainty. "Open the door, Alessia," he said, voice low. "We're not doing this over text. We're not doing this," as if this, my refusal, was just a phase he could correct. I didn't move. "I mean it," he added, knocking again, harder this time. "Stop acting crazy." Crazy. The words slid under my skin like something sharp. I opened the door, but only halfway. "What do you want?" I asked. He laughed once, short and disbelieving. "What do I want? I want my sister back. I'm right here." "No," he snapped, "the one who actually cared." The words hit harder than I expected. "I cared," I said quietly, "just stopped paying for it." For a second, something flickered across his face, uncertainty, maybe even fear. Then it was gone. "Mom's waiting," he said, stepping forward like it was already decided. "We're having a family meeting. I'm not coming." Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. His voice dropped. "Don't do this, Alessia. You're embarrassing all of us." I felt it then, that old pull, the instinct to fix it, to smooth it over, to make everything quiet again. My throat tightened, but instead of stepping aside, I stepped back.
"No," I said. One word. Final. His expression hardened. "Fine," he muttered. "We'll do it your way." An hour later, my phone lit up. Video call. Family meeting. I answered. Mom appeared first, arms crossed, eyes already judging. Rufus sat beside her. Dad leaned back, silent but watching. The air felt thick, even through the screen. "Alessia," Mom began, voice controlled. "Let's be reasonable." I nodded. "Go ahead." She exchanged a glance with Rufus. Then, "Your brother has an opportunity," she said carefully. "A business. He just needs a co-signer." My stomach dropped. "How much?" "A small loan," Rufus cut in quickly. $230,000. The number echoed in my head. $230,000 for someone who couldn't keep a job? "You're joking," I said. "No," Mom snapped. "We're asking you to trust your family." Trust. The word felt almost insulting. "I've trusted you," I said slowly, "for 11.5 years. And now you won't?" Rufus shot back. "No," I said. The silence that followed was absolute, because this wasn't hesitation. This was the end. "I'm done being your backup plan," I continued, my voice steady now. "I'm done being your bank. I'm done." Mom's face went pale. "You will regret this." Maybe, but as I looked at them, really looked, I realized something that made my chest ache and lighten at the same time.
They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing what I gave. I guess we'll find out. And before they could take it back, I ended the call. Because some breaking points don't shatter you, they set you free. The week before I was due to fly to Sydney, I made a list. Lists had always been my coping mechanism, the way I brought order to interior chaos by converting it into manageable columns. This list was different from the ones I'd made before. It wasn't a list of other people's needs. It was a list of actions, each one a link in a chain I was dismantling. Each one, clicked or canceled or signed, a small private revolution. Remove name from family phone plan. Done. Unlink Rufus's car insurance. Done. Cancel utility direct debits tied to Aldersham Street. Done. Freeze shared credit facility. Done. Transfer savings to new account. Done. Sign Sydney contract. Done. That last line. Done. I had signed it on a Monday morning at my kitchen table with good coffee and both windows open. Dara had been there. She'd insisted, said every major life decision deserved a witness, and she'd sat across from me eating a croissant with theatrical calm while I scrolled to the signature page, hovered, breathed, and clicked. "Well?" she'd said. "Done," I'd said. She'd held up her coffee and a toast. "To the woman formerly known as everyone's safety net." I'd laughed, a real one from somewhere low and startled, and for a moment the kitchen had felt so full of simple, uncomplicated warmth that I'd had to look out the window just to compose myself. The day before my flight, my phone rang 43 times. Mom, 7 times, Rufus, twice, Aunt Miriam, 4 times, numbers I didn't recognize, relatives I barely saw, mobilized by some family group chat I wasn't in, dispatched to chip at the walls of my decision. I finished packing. Passport, work ID, contract documents, 3 photographs. One of Dara and me at the office Christmas party 2 years ago, both laughing at something cut out of frame. One of my parents in the garden at Aldersham Street, young before everything became complicated. One of Rufus and me when he was 4 years old and I was 15, on the beach at Swanage, and we are both squinting into the sun, and neither of us knows yet what the years between us will eventually cost. I packed all. In 3 hours a car would come. In 6 hours I would be at the gate. In 24 hours I would be somewhere no one had my account number, my address, or my history of saying yes. I turned off the light. I slept. The plane lifted through the clouds, and with it, something inside me finally let go. No messages, no demands. No, don't make this a thing, just silence. Sydney arrived the way things arrive when you've been waiting for them long enough that you stop expecting them. Suddenly, completely, and with a quality of light you weren't prepared for. I'd imagined Australia would be loud, brash, the way it was described in the abstract, big skies, relentless sun, a culture of cheerful velocity. What I found, stepping out of the arrivals hall at 7:10 on a Tuesday morning, was something more like expansion. The sky was enormous and blue in a way that English skies simply aren't, as if someone had taken the usual ceiling and moved it somewhere impractically high, and the light fell differently here, direct and particular, without the softening filter of northern clouds, and the air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and salt and something else I couldn't name, something new. And I stood on the pavement with my suitcase handle in my hand, and I breathed it in. Just breathed it. My apartment was small, bare walls, 1 suitcase, a kettle that clicked too loudly in the quiet. I stood in the middle of the room and whispered, "This is mine. Not ours, not theirs, mine." Days passed, then a week. No calls, until one night my phone lit up with a voicemail. "Mom." I hesitated, then pressed play. "We're fine," she said, her voice thinner than I remembered. Rufus found a job. Things are handled. Handled. Without me. I sank on the couch, something tight in my chest loosening. Slow, almost painful. They didn't fall apart, I murmured. A soft knock startled me. I opened the door to my neighbor, an older woman with kind eyes. "First week?" she smiled. I nodded. "It's been a week since I arrived," I replied. "I'm still getting used to things." She studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "Everything will be bouquet." That night, I opened my old notes, years of payments, sacrifices, silent bargains. At the bottom, I typed one final line: debt cleared, financially and emotionally. I closed the laptop, and for the first time in my life, the silence didn't ask anything from me. It gave. And as I looked out at a city that didn't know my past, a single thought settled deep in my chest. If love costs you yourself, was it ever love at all?
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.